Alright guys, the games in the Championship are coming thick and fast at the moment, and we are back again for another full fixture list in the Championship to go ahead and preview in today's video. So as always, if you're going to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do get your thoughts and predictions in the comments down below. Without any further ado, let's jump into these matches. So starting out at Ewood Park for Blackburn up against Cardiff. Both sides could certainly do with 3 points in this one. Cardiff have now drawn their last 4 consecutive matches. Their last 2 games both finishing as goalless draws, and I think they were quite happy to walk away with that 0-0 away at Coventry in midweek. Certainly for the second half, it was Cardiff who were the side who were happy to sort of sit in and soak up the pressure. Don't actually think they registered a shot in that second half. Going away to Blackburn at the moment is an interesting one, and perhaps an opportunity with the slide in form that we've seen from this Rovers side. Midweek was actually quite frustrating for them, taking the lead once again in a similar fashion to how they did against Sunderland, but everything that could have unravelled for them in the second half absolutely went ahead and did that. Middlesbrough had that instant response right after half time, and then the red card for one of the most trivial matters I've ever seen. It was it was ridiculously silly that Buckley received the red card for, hesitantly chucking the ball at the opposition, but such was the case in the end, and from that point Middlesbrough obviously had that little bit more quality to go on and win the game. I do think this is a decent opportunity perhaps for Blackburn to get back to winning ways. While Cardiff have been solid defensively lately, they've not offered up that much of a goal threat since the return to action, and for a prediction in this one, with Blackburn being quite all or nothing in the Championship, avoiding draws at all costs, I think it might be Rovers who take this one. So score prediction, I'm going to back Blackburn for a 2-0 home victory there, but another 0-0 for Cardiff wouldn't surprise me either. And next up then to Blackpool up against Sunderland. Blackpool, who had that concessive streak of draws leading up to that game against Sheffield United, which was always going to be difficult for them, and they ended up losing that, which doesn't leave them in a great position. They've had Huddersfield leapfrogging them in the league now and are in quite the sticky patch, well rooted into the bottom 3. While they did have chances, to be fair, in that game against Sheffield United, the away team's quality more than showed and absolutely killed Blackpool in several areas. And looking at how many goals this Sunderland side are scoring at the moment, how much confidence they're playing with as well, I've got the feeling that a similar game might unfold in this one. Sunderland are absolutely prolific in midweek. We spoke on a recent episode of the Championship Roundup just how much potential that forward line has of Sims, Stewart and Diallo. All 3 of them were on the score sheet in midweek as they put 4 past Wigan. Some of the interplay was absolutely fantastic. Diallo especially. Every match that ends now, I'm seeing a 3-minute compilation reel on Twitter of all his highlights from an individual match. Has been that good. But having Sims and Stewart back in as those clinical players in the final third is absolutely massive for Sunderland. And going off the form book, the momentum around both sides, I've got to back an away win here, I think. So score prediction, I'm going to go 3-1 Sunderland and back their scoring streak to continue. Next then to Coventry up against Bristol City. Both sides will be looking to get back on the score sheet after both playing out goalless draws in midweek. Coventry had that quite frustrating one against Cardiff, 0 apiece. I think that squad in particular is looking quite thin on the ground at the moment, particularly with the devastating news of that Callum O'Hare injury, who could be set to miss the next 9 months with a confirmed ACL injury. Absolutely gutting news considering, he'd only recently recovered from another injury setback, and to have him out for that time period, is absolutely gutting. He's one of the best players to watch in the Championship in my eyes when he's completely on it, so that's going to be a massive blow that Coventry are going to have to cover up in terms of adding in some extra creativity perhaps in the January window. For Bristol City, they also played out a goalless draw with Millwall. On the surface of things, I think a decent enough point. The Den's been a pretty tough place for away sides to go to this season. Also think the clean sheet is a massive tick for Bristol City as well, considering how leaky they have been in recent weeks, and they actually had a very good chance to win it with that chance that fell to Andy Vyman at the far post, just spinning on it and just putting it wide. For a prediction in this one, I don't think there's going to be all too much in it. I'm not sure if there's going to be all too much goalmouth action after they both played out a 0-0 in midweek. I'm going to sit on the fence for a 1-1, I think, between these two. One team could very easily sneak that though. Next then to Huddersfield up against Luton. It was an absolutely huge result for Huddersfield in midweek, and to string together back-to-back results back-to-back victories is absolutely key for teams in and around the bottom of the Championship, particularly with how many draws have been popping up in that area of the table recently. 6 points from their last 6 massively has elevated them and has made them competitive once again. You know, it's got them off the bottom and now within touching distance of those sides above them. This will be a different sort of test though against the Luton side, who I have really liked the look of recently. They themselves have won their last 2 games. Really convincing stuff in midweek to come off the back of that really fantastic Norwich performance with a 3-0 showing away at QPR. Carlton Morris being the main man in that game with a brace, and Alfie Doherty with an absolute thunderbolt as well into the top corner. Huddersfield have looked more competitive recently, and it's interesting that this is a repeat of last season's playoff semi-final and how different the circumstances are between both sides going into this one. I just think Luton might have a bit more quality in this game. So while Huddersfield have got themselves back up and going for the season, I think Luton may take this one on the road. Score prediction, going to go 2-1 Luton in this game. Next up then to the for Millwall up against Rotherham. A little bit disappointing from Millwall in midweek. Couldn't quite click up through the gears and get all too much creativity in the final third to break down that Bristol City side, who probably actually had the better chances over the full 90 minutes in that one. Good opportunity here though to go ahead and get back to winning ways against the Rotherham side, who are desperately out of form as things stand. We mentioned the form leading up to that game against Huddersfield in midweek, and the fact that they lost that game in the manner in which they did, 2-0 without getting on the score sheet, is a massive cause for concern, and they themselves are now massively looking down at the relegation trapdoor beneath them. Not only the result itself, but I think what that does mentally to be beaten in a game like that, to then follow up with a tough trip away at Millwall. I'm not sure where the mindset will be at with Rotherham at the moment, and I think I fancy Millwall just to get back to winning ways here. So score prediction, and I tend to back Millwall at the Den. I'm going to go 1-0 Millwall in this game. Just think there are too many vulnerabilities with that Rotherham side at the moment. Next then to St Andrews for Birmingham up against Middlesbrough. An interesting matchup this one. Middlesbrough very much on the top 6 hunt now under Michael Carrick. The Carrick era is well and truly well underway. It's a fantastic bit of momentum that they're picking up at the moment. Another victory in midweek, 2-1 against Blackburn. Turned things around after going behind in the first half from that game. And while that, quite controversial red card certainly helped things, it was Middlesbrough who had that more impetus about them in the second half. And fair play to Carrick for noticing a few things, and he's done this in a few recent matches, knows when to go ahead and alter things, how to switch up things and use the overall squad. And I'm sure that Middlesbrough are a set of supporters who are eagerly awaiting the January transfer window, as I'm sure there'll be a bit more investment going in there in January for that promotion push. Now Birmingham hasn't been the easiest of places for away sides to visit throughout the season so far. They've not lost all too many matches at home, although there have been some exceptions to that, but with the run that Middlesbrough are on at the moment, I think they just take this one on the road. Score prediction, I'm going to go 2-1 Middlesbrough in this game. I think they just edge it. Next then to Norwich up against Watford. An interesting battle at this point in the season. In the reverse fixture, it was Watford who got the better of this one. One of Bilic's first victories in charge of Watford. I think his first home win came against Norwich. 2-1 in that game as they proved to be the better side. But a lot of circumstances have since changed from that point. As of recording, Norwich still haven't gone ahead and hired anyone on a permanent basis as their new manager, but we've had some interesting names being bandied about recently. When that Steve Bruce story broke on Twitter, for example, I think Norwich Twitter almost went into meltdown. David Wagner, as things stand, I think is the favourite, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of moving plates on that over the course of the next few days, and by the time you guys are watching this, I'm sure some new managers are now being considered. In terms of these two sides at the moment, I think because Burnley and Sheffield United have just looked such a cut above everyone else so far, it probably is the top 6, which is, the baseline aim for both clubs at this point in time. And given how much inconsistency is around this part of the table, due to the quality that each team has in their squads, these are two of the sides who I do think have it in them to go on that consistent run, but we've just not seen that from them up until this point in the season. Score prediction for this game, I think I'm sitting on the fence for it. I'm going for a 1-1 between these two, just two quite unpredictable sides at the moment. Next then to Stoke up against Preston. In the reverse fixture between these two sides, it was Alex Neil who got the better of Ryan Lowe. Alex Neil returned to Deepdale, picking up all 3 points in that one, and I'm not feeling great going into this game either. We had that high of that thrilling game against Blackburn being the return to action for Preston. We then followed up with 3 consecutive defeats where there's been so many different problems with each of the performances. In midweek, it was a pretty miserable performance against West Brom, to be honest, albeit a very good and informed West Brom side, but we absolutely didn't lay a glove on them, and had it not been for Freddie Woodman popping up with some heroics in the first half, that game could have been 3-4-0 to West Brom, and it really wouldn't have flattered them. Preston offered next to nothing going forward. I know that Stoke haven't been the most of prolific sides at home so far this season. We share that as a similar characteristic with Stoke up until this point in the season, with how much frustration we've actually had in our home matches. But Neil up against Lowe again. Do you know what? I think I might fancy Neil to get one over on him tactically for this one in a game of quite fine margins. Score prediction, I think Stoke may take this one 2-1. Preston at the moment are just looking a little bit tired and lethargic for me. Next then to Swansea up against Burnley. Now the problem for Burnley at the moment is, does complacency seep into their game with the lead on 3rd place and everyone else other than Sheffield United that they have in the Championship at this point in time? Vincent Kompany has to ensure that this team stays in fit and firing condition, and this game against Swansea does have the potential to be an interesting one, as it's quite an interesting clash of styles here with how much each team wants to go ahead and dominate the ball. Thinking back to the reverse fixture between these two, it was Burnley who ended up wiping the floor with Swansea. They beat them 4-0 in the end, and it ended up being one of the few matches this season where Swansea have had less of the ball than the opposition have had. Burnley just shaded that one, I think, with 52% possession, so we'll be interesting to look into the possession statistics for this one. Score prediction time. Swansea could put in a performance here, and they have done against some of the other big sides in the Championship this season, but I think the safe bet would probably be with Burnley again. So score prediction, I'm going to go 2-0 Burnley in this game. Fancy them on the road for all 3 points here, I think. And next up then to the Hawthorns for West Brom up against Reading. I was at the Hawthorns in midweek, and I have to say I was really quite impressed actually by West Brom. Some of their patterns of play and how fluid they were in actually playing the ball through the lines. I think in the end, in that one against North End, they had 17 shots, and when we were discussing Preston before, it really wouldn't have flattered West Brom had they won that game by 3 or 4 goals. Freddie Woodman came up with a string of saves in the first half, and the penny finally seems to be dropping for them in terms of, first of all under Core Brown, he had an instant impact in terms of picking up the results, but I think that now the performances are really following along with that, which is really quite a promising sign, I think, for a sustained run of form and a proper go at the top 6 this season. I think if I had to call my top 6 right now, I would have West Brom included in that. Reading have been a bit of a hit and miss side on the road so far this season. I think it's fair to say always quite unpredictable, but with how good West Brom I thought looked in midweek, I'm going to back them for another win in this one, I think. So score prediction, I'm going to go 2-0 to the Baggies. Just think they'll have too much for Reading in the final third here. Next then to Wigan up against Hull. Both sides could definitely do with 3 points in this one. Wigan, the concerns continue to grow, and I think with each game where they continue to be as leaky at the back as they have been recently, that really goes ahead and chips down on their confidence, because while there have been some other promising elements in terms of a different approach in the final third, defensively they've been absolutely woeful recently. 8 goals conceded now across their last 2 matches, and while Hull at times have been a little bit wasteful in the final third, we've seen a few examples of that so far under a senior, surely they're fancying their chances to score a few goals against this Wigan backline, which has looked so leaky and lethargic so far. The uphill battle that Toure now has on his hands, I think, is absolutely evident now that Wigan are sat rock bottom of the Championship, having lost their last 3 matches. Like we were discussing with Huddersfield before, though, between a lot of these sides in this region of the table, there's been so many draws between them recently, and that's meant that no team has really been able to make much of a run on each other, and for that reason, I might be just edging towards a draw in this game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Hull have a bit more quality in the final third to win it. I'm going to go with my gut though and say 1-1 between these two. It's a tough game to call again. And then finishing things off with QPR up against Sheffield United. I think under Critchley so far at QPR, we've probably seen the good, the bad and the ugly. 3 games in charge, a win, draw and a loss so far, and quite a damning defeat I thought in midweek actually. Well beaten by Luton in the end, and that that probably goes ahead and properly highlights how much work is needed on this QPR squad from both a coaching and strategic in terms of a recruitment point of view in the January window to go ahead and prop them up with a bit more quality. Sheffield United on a fantastic run, continued that in midweek. I did think that maybe that game against Blackpool could have been a potential banana skin. Blackpool have been that sort of side so far this season to have thrown in a couple of those unpredictable results, and Blackpool actually had a fair few chances in that game, but Sheffield United's quality told in the final third. Two really well taken goals in the end. That first one by Sander Berge, the second one on the break as well. Iliman Ndiaye continues to impress, being that creative hub in that side as well. I just think they'll have too much for this QPR side in this game. So, score prediction, I'm going to go 3-1 Sheffield United. I fancy the unbeaten run to continue. But guys, there we have it. Those are my championship predictions heading into the New Year games. Do get your thoughts in the comments down below, and do leave your predictions down there as well. We've got so much championship action coming our way at the moment. We can't get enough of it. But thank you very much for tuning in today, guys. If you did going to enjoy, do leave a like, stick around for some regular championship content, and I'll see you all in the next one.